The project to unify this that I've proposed, my wife has worked on, and others have worked on, is called the Eurasian Land Bridge Program. It's sometimes called the Silk Road Program. We developed this over a number of stages during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1989, we launched it in one form. My wife and I and several others launched this package, which became first known as the European Productive Triangle. And then later, in 1992, my wife negotiated or made discussions with people in China on this policy. And this was based on looking at some of the problems in the former Soviet Union and looking at China and saying, here is a common interest to develop the undeveloped and underutilized great area of Central Asia, which can only be done by this kind of method. And this is something which is in the common interest of China, of Europe, of the former Soviet Union, as well as the United States. So therefore, we should make this process, which connects the largest parts of the world population to industrial development, and takes the largest area of undeveloped area outside of Africa, and converts that into an area of growth, of global growth. Now, what's needed is several things changes. We need high-speed transportation. We're talking about thousands of miles. You're talking about the U.S. transcontinental railroad system, as it was understood by Lincoln, developed on a Eurasian scale, involving not a few million people, tens of millions of people, but we're talking about billions of people. We're talking about the greatest growth on this planet for the next century if we do it right. We're talking about something. This means new transportation systems, such as high-speed magnetic levitation rail systems instead of friction rail systems. This means tremendous amounts of power. We have it. High-temperature nuclear reactors of a new type, the HTR type, which are being mass-produced or series-produced in China, and which can be series-produced, German design, can be series-produced in other countries. You can find the nuclear energy. We need vast water management. This area is technically water scarce. We can solve some of the problems by water management. We also are going to have to change the ecology of the planet. We're going to have to desalinate vast masses of seawater on coastal areas and save the upriver rainfall for the upriver needs. We're going to have to mine fresh water, mined from oceans, as well as managed from rivers, into areas which are deserts, like the great deserts of the Central Asia. We're going to have to do the same thing with Africa. And that's what's needed. These are great projects which, in terms of their economic impact, are equivalent to a mobilization for general warfare, and which will have the economic benefits which we are accustomed to having from technology, in other words, from large-scale mobilization for general warfare. We're going to have to increase our own ability as machine tool powers. We're going to have to revolutionize our educational systems to become science-oriented again. We're going to have to develop machine tool capabilities in countries that need it, in partnership with us. Now, there's going to be a need for food. There are various ways we can meet the needs for food in Asia. The great way to meet that need is Africa. Africa is the present greatest potential food grower on this planet. That is, it has the greatest area which is designated operational agricultural land, which, if suitably developed, could very readily become a great surplus food producer. If you develop a transportation system of this type and link the so-called Silk Road or land bridge system through Egypt into a rail link in Africa, which we could build for them. We don't have to charge them anything. The benefits are so great, just give it to them. They don't have any money, so give it to them. Because the benefits, the payoff is tremendous. Once they have that kind of system, then the potential for the food growing potential of Africa becomes tremendous. And that becomes a basis for rebuilding Africa and giving it that initial start, that kickstart it needs to enter efficiently and fully into modern society. So we have before us two alternatives. We have on the one hand the prospect, if we don't do what we have to do, of a new dark age descending upon all of mankind, a dark age whose best paradigm, for purposes of comparison, is the dark age that struck Central Europe with the collapse of the Lombard banking system in the middle of the 14th century. And that can happen planet-wide, which would mean about 2 generations or so of new dark age throughout this planet. with the world's population perhaps collapsing to levels of the several hundred million, which was world population level during the 14th century. That's a likely prospect. On the other hand, we have, if we cooperate with these countries of Asia to create a just new world economic order on the ruins of a bankrupt system and engage in great enterprises of the type which we've conducted before, to develop Eurasia and to bring justice to Africa at last. If we do these things, then the 20th century can be the brightest century of human existence. Because by these means, by bringing people to this process, we have the opportunity to establish as universal a principle which is universal. The principle that all persons, man and woman, are each made in the image of God and must be afforded a condition of life in society, an opportunity which is consistent with a being of such qualities, and to develop and perfect our political systems to bring them into accord with that objective. This next century can be the most glorious in the existence of mankind to date, or it can be the most awful. The decision lies now with us in 1988. Can we summon the leaders and the leadership to do what many people still at this moment would consider unthinkable? To maximize the risk rather than spreading and minimizing it. And by maximizing the risk, as the great commanders in warfare, to win the war, whereas those who minimize the risk are sure to lose it. Thank you.